Well, good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar titled Using Data for Stewardship in Church360 Members. My name is Peter Frank and I am the Senior Manager of Concordia Technology Solutions. I've been with our group here at CTS for a little over 5 years. I've been with the organization for over 10 now, which it just has flown by. So I have been around with Church360 since pretty much its beginning. I joined the team and the CTS team back in 2012, right when we did a full relaunch with Church360 Members. It had been out a little while before that, but all of the major improvements that we've made have been a key part of what I do here at CTS and coordinating with our product team, our developers, and giving them feedback from customers. So what you'll see here today is something that we're all very proud of, that we have taken a lot of time to make as practical as possible for you in the church who are using this on a daily basis to share the gospel. So my contact information is on the screen. You are welcome to reach out to me at any time. Email is usually the best way to get a hold of me, but you can also call me every once in a while, like I am right now. I'll be in my office. That doesn't happen as often as I'd like. A couple housekeeping items before we begin. Get to that screen, there we go. First off, I'll be presenting for about 50 minutes today. We've got an hour planned, so the last 10 minutes will be for question and answers. And I do ask that you ask questions throughout. That gives me an idea of how many questions I'll have during the Q&A time. And it looks like I've got a number in the queue. So I'll be covering those during those 10 minutes. And if I can't get to all the questions during those 10 minutes, or if I don't get to them during the presentation, I'll respond later on with email, so you'll be able to get your answers there. But I'm going to try to get everything in. Now this recording, this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be shared. We'll send an email out to everybody who has registered for it, whether you're able to attend or not. If you are one of those who are watching the recording after the fact, thank you for doing that. I'm sorry you couldn't join us live, but for those of you who are here live, you'll get the benefit of being able to ask questions throughout. So thank you for being here. Now, if you are not familiar with Concordia Technology Solutions, we are the church administration division of Concordia Publishing House. And we've been developing software since 1984, which is just kind of crazy for me to think of what technology it was like then compared to what it is now. But we've always had the goal of providing tools for churches to help take care of these mundane office tasks, provide more information about your congregation, and allow you to focus on the things that only you can focus on. And like I said, we've been doing that since 1984. Now the topic for today is Church360 Members. If you are not familiar with how that fits into our product suite, it is one of 3 products underneath the umbrella of Church360. The other 2 are Church360 Unite and Church360 Ledger. Now, Church360 Unite is our church website builder, and there's a lot of integration points between that and Members. And so some of your questions that you might have may be answered with how Unite handles it. Unite is the end user facing portion of Church360, so your members can sign in, interact with each other, view the member directory. So we'll touch on that a little bit. Church360 Ledger, as it sounds, is the financial component. It's your general ledger and allows you to track all of your transactions. I tend to describe it as Church360 Members allows you to track the money coming in, the offerings. Church360 Ledger lets you track everything else with finances, money going out, like payroll and the like. So I presented on that on Monday. The recording is available online. You can learn a little bit more about that. I presented on Unite on Tuesday, so there's more information about that. But today we're going to focus on Church360 Members. Now, Church360 Members is named Members because it's all about your people, the people in your congregation, not just your members, although that is the primary focus. You can add non-members and prospects to this, and we'll look at how to distinguish those in just a few moments. But then it's the data surrounding them, your people, that is most important, like attendance data and offerings data. And that is key in getting a complete 360 picture of your congregation, thus the name. So before we go too far, I did make a few assumptions about you, and I'd like to validate those assumptions. So first off, I'm assuming that you are familiar with church management software and how you would use it to a certain extent in your congregation. Hopefully you'll see new possibilities today, and I'll be able to show you things that you didn't know were already there. But that's my first assumption, that you're at least familiar with it. My second assumption is that you are new to Church360 Members. Now, I know some of you have already purchased it and are using it. Others are considering it, and I'm going to ask that question in just a moment to give me a better understanding of who's here today. The last assumption I have, and I'm pretty sure this is safe, I'm not going to validate it because I've yet to find somebody who's not. I'm assuming you're extremely busy. I thank you for taking time out of your day to watch this webinar, and if you don't find value, if your questions aren't being answered and you need to do other things, that's fine. Please reach out to us in a different way after the fact and we'll be able to get the answers to you. Church360 is a tool for you to use, but is not your ministry. Your ministry and sharing the gospel with people is far more important than anything you'll do on the computer tracking the data. But this is a tool that can help you, and so I hope that it's worth your time. That's my goal. So before I go too far, let me throw out a few questions for you here. My first one, if you could answer the poll, we'll make sure that goes live. If you could just let me know what role in the congregation is your primary role. I've put a few options up there: ordained pastor, administrator, financial manager, called church worker, or other. There's so many different roles that people can have in the congregation. Everybody wears multiple hats. If you could just let me know your primary role, that would help me get a better understanding of who is here. And so it looks like we've got mostly administrators, which is what I would expect. And then at least one financial manager, a couple called church workers. So thank you very much for letting me know. The next question is about, are you currently using Church360 Members in your congregation? And I put yes, no, and no, but planning to subscribe soon to help me get a better idea of who is here. We offer these webinars to everybody, and many times our customers are using them as training, and other times our potential customers are considering it. So it looks like the vast majority are customers, and so that is good to know. My next question for you who are using it is what your skill level is, because that helps me understand how much I can gloss over some of the really easy stuff, and how far I should go on the details. So if you don't mind answering that, I've got expert, advanced, intermediate, novice, and newbie. And it looks like we've got everybody who is intermediate or newer. And so that's kind of what I planned for, so that's good. So yeah, more than 50% are in that intermediate. So if I'll go at a little bit higher level. If there are questions, if I go too fast, stop me and let me know by putting a question in the chat, and I'll try to slow down. So, all right, very good. Let's go ahead and move into our outline and jump right into the presentation. So the outline for today, we're going to go through an overview, whoops, too far, overview of Church360 Members. And so I'll show you a few of the basic things with navigation. I'll only spend a few minutes on that since most of you are using it. But the core part of today's presentation is how to track key stewardship data. So we're going to do that in 4 broad categories. And throughout this all, I hope you get a good tour of the software so that you can see the wide possibilities of what you can do. Lastly, we'll take the Q&A right at the end, like I mentioned before, for 10 minutes. All right, so the key stewardship data that we're going to be focusing on is the traditional 3 categories plus 1. So as I've grown up, I've always heard of stewardship divided into 3 categories: time, talent, and treasures. And that really means how much time are you spending in activities and investing, not just in the congregation, but in the Lord's Word and in service to Him and to the church. The talent is the gifts that God has given you as an individual. How do you use that to further His kingdom? And then, of course, treasures, which I think is often the stereotypical stewardship thing, which is money and donations, offerings. That's a part of stewardship, but it's not the whole thing. And as we, at my congregation, I'm on our board of elders who's overseeing stewardship right now, and I'm also on our church council. we talk about stewardship a lot, and it's important to remind us and to remind our members that stewardship is all about the gifts that God has given us. It's not about what we own. We are just managing His gifts. And so those are the three broad categories. But today I'm going to add a fourth one in there that's a little bit different, but I think especially appropriate for church management software. It's how we manage our data. Data really does affect those three other areas to help us be good stewards of those, so that we can be saving time by not repeating tasks, by utilizing the gifts of our members as volunteers and tracking that so that we can call on them for service. And then also from a treasure standpoint, having that information available so that we know who is giving what when we need to ask for more, who we can go to who would be willing based on the information we know. So I put that in there. That's not quite the same as the other three, but I think it's appropriate for today's discussion. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to switch views here. So if you have not seen Church360 Members before, this is the primary view. Up in the top, there's a place to put your logo, and in fact, I can put that in here real quickly. Most of you, if you're using it, probably already know how to do it. I meant to do that beforehand. I even saved the image. So there we go. We'll put that in there. So Christ Community Church is our demo church that we use. It's a fictional congregation in the fictional Bakersville, Missouri area. So all the information you see today will not be about real people. So don't worry if we show offering records. Nobody's offering is being displayed on the internet here. In the top navigation, you've got the 5 core areas of Church360 Members. And I'm going to zoom in just a tad, just so you can see it, because I know that on a screen, on a monitor like this, it might be pretty small. So people, events, attendance, offerings, and reports are the 5 most utilized areas in Church360 Members, and that's why we put them there, and for easy access. On the far right, you have a notifications area, which will let you know when a process has completed if it's a longer process, so things like contribution statements from member directories. You've got what we call collections and admins. I also call it the settings cog. It's like a cog in a machine. Your collections has all sorts of information that you would use, especially during setup, and used throughout the year, but not necessarily on a daily basis. And we'll touch on each of these. And below is the admin area, which we'll jump in just a moment. To the far right, you'll have a user profile, and this will either take you to your profile within the application or your user settings. So I'll click on that. That allows you to add a username rather than an email address, change your password, or even choose your default view. So if you prefer to get into reports right away, you could set that as your default view, and whenever you sign in, you'll go there. Now I want to go over here to settings briefly and talk about a few key things. In general settings, you have information about your church, your name, phone number, address, time zone. These are things that will print out on your contribution statements that'll pre-populate in a few other areas for you. So it's important to keep that up to date and filled out. That information doesn't change very often. The time zone is in there as well. That's to keep everything straight in terms of the time. Denomination is important for the annual report, which we'll look at the very end of today's presentation. But it does change your membership statuses, how you receive members, how you remove members. We don't have every denomination on there. We have the ones that we work with the most. But if your denomination isn't on there, I would encourage you to let us know. We always look at investing some more time in expanding that. Below that is some things related to Sunday school, but also the start week on is an important thing. Start week on Saturday is what I have here. This should be the very first service that your pastor preaches the sermon. That's how I describe it. If you have a Thursday evening service, you have to decide, is that part of the weekend before or the weekend after? And so if it's after, you'd start your weekend on that Thursday. Start your week on Thursday, and this is so that you can track attendance patterns from week to week. Most of our congregations do things on a weekly basis, although the days of the week will vary. Below that is custom fields, and we'll get into that in just a little while. Before I jump into our first section, which is time, I do want to call your attention to one more thing on the screen. In the lower right-hand corner, there is a blue or teal eye. This takes you to the Information Center, and you are able to search our help articles for a variety of different questions. And if you, like, how do I add a person, and search for that, and you can see all of the different options there. Once you're in there, you can also see a full article, and it'll take you to our help system. And this is talking about how to add a photo. I should have rephrased my questions. We're always looking to add new things so that we track which questions are asked so that we can improve the help center. The last thing on here is to send us a message, and you can always send any of feedback to us, and it'll go directly not only to our support team, but it'll also flow into a notification system that our programmers use, that I use, that we see what customers are saying almost in real time. It takes a couple seconds to update, and that's it. So please, any suggestions or questions you have or concerns, ideas, put them in there. We love to hear feedback from our customers. That drives our development of the product. All right, well, enough of the overview. Let's jump into stewardship. And the first thing we're going to talk about is time. Now, of course, time in the application is one way that you can serve the Lord using the gifts that He's given you, the gift of time. But primarily when we talk about stewardship, it's related to attendance at different events. And so the second tab up here is events, and this provides a master church calendar for you. Now, there's several different types of calendars in here. If you click on the far right, that calendar button, many of these are pre-populated. I'm going to deselect them. So there's a few things like baptisms, birthdays, confirmation anniversaries, wedding anniversaries, death dates. All of that is based on your people data and will show up on the calendar, but you can, of course, turn it off. What you often see will be a church calendar that has worship and education and fellowship events. And so as you select your calendars, it'll change what is displayed. It's easy to export this into a format for like the newsletter. So if you go to week, you can see what a week view looks like, and then you can export or download that to a Word document where you can then modify it and copy paste it into your newsletter or your bulletin for the week. But let's go here and create a new event to show some of those options. So when you create a new event, and we will just call this, what is today, Thursday? So a Thursday night Bible study. We'll add it to a calendar, so the education calendar, and we'll say that this is going to be in the conference room, and it'll be tonight from 6:30 to 7:30, and we'll repeat this every single week on Thursdays, and we'll end by the end of the year. Now, I am going to start it up earlier in the month. We're going to start it as of October 5th. Now, this is the key part of stewardship data. The rest of this so far has just been like a typical calendar like you might see in Google or Outlook. But the next part is what really makes it different. In the bottom right-hand corner, you can mark whether attendance is taken, whether communion is served. So if it's at a worship service, you can serve communion, and I'll show you how to track that in just a few moments. And then there's also offering, whether you want to take offering at this or not. Now we can go ahead and click Add, and that'll put it on the calendar to refresh, and there we have it. Now, we mentioned before under collections, there's a number of things. One of those is calendars, and you can see what types of calendars are available. Now, education is one of them. We could also add one for, let's say, Bible studies. And we'll put, we'll do kind of a reddish color for that. The colors are just to help you distinguish it on the calendar. So we'll add Bible studies in there. So let's go back to our event. And we'll go, whoops. You don't have to start at any particular time. I tend to go to the month that we're in. It makes it easier. If I click on that event, I can now add Bible studies to this. And so now when I track attendance, I can track attendance at either an education event or Bible studies event. It's doing it both because I have the calendar set for both. So I'll go ahead and hit save and update all events in the schedule. And now I can hover over it and it'll show those different types of calendars. So if I am selecting just education, oops, there you go, it'll show up. And if I'm selecting Bible studies, it'll show up. And you'll see how the color changes based on the calendar type. Now that's going to be really important as we get into reports later on, but I wanted to highlight that here before we jumped into attendance. Attendance is this third tab, and it's a very different view than many of ours. You'll have a right-hand navigation, which is a little different than what you typically see, and that's because you don't really need it too much. You are just going to select an event on here, and so let's say the 19th, last Thursday night Bible study. Now, I did select communion for that event. It's kind of different to have communion in the Bible study, but I wanted to highlight how you would have communion attendance as well as individual attendance. So at this Bible study, you now see that below I have all of the people in my database listed out. And they're grouped by household. So this first one, which we'll be looking at quite a bit, the Abbott household, Dave Abbott, Sue Abbott, Lacey, and Jacob. If I click on, let me click on Dave first. Dave's name is now highlighted orange, that box around him. That means that he is attended. And if I look at the lower left, I've got one attended plus additional head count. I can always add more unknown people to it. On the far right, I have my total attendance. Now, if I click other people, those numbers will change and add up. What I can also do is I'll unselect all of them. If I select the household, everybody in the household is marked as attended. And the same thing works for communion. If I click the chalice there, that chalice icon, everybody will be marked as communed. Now, of course, like Lacey and Jacob, as you'll see in a few minutes, they're kids, they will not commune, and so I'll uncheck that. And so I could do it either way. I could check Dave and Sue as communed, I could check the whole family as communed and uncheck them. The same thing works for attendance. It's just meant to be really easy for you to enter attendance. Now we've got some other tools like a quick filter that as you start typing, like the Robinson family, they're farther down in the alphabet. It's easier to start typing in their name and then they'll show up. And then I can use the mouse to click on it. I can also use keyboard shortcuts, and there's a whole listing of those keyboard shortcuts in the information center here. So if you click on the I and click keyboard shortcuts, it'll show you all of that. So as you are considering how your congregation members are spending their time, the more you track with attendance, the better. And that's why I did a Bible study attendance here, because worship attendance is pretty typical of tracking it. But it only shows you one aspect of how your members are spending their time in the congregation. So we're going to move on to grouping, and grouping allows you to use this data that you've entered in for various other aspects. We're going to start here in the attendance view, and we're going to move over to people in just a few moments. So in the far right, not quite far right, in the mid right, you'll see showing 240 people in everyone. This has a drop down, and these are your smart groups. Now, smart groups are a combination of variable data or static data. Variable data meaning that as data is entered in, it changes who's in that group. Those are the real smart groups. The static data is what we call tags, and we'll look at that in people. But these are things that you add to people or take off. Manual actions, which is why it's static. It doesn't change unless you change it, or somebody else in your congregation. So when you click this little hamburger menu, those three lines, those look like a hamburger. You click that, it opens up your smart group tray. Or drawer, we sometimes use that word. When we click add trait, you can say anyone who is attended, and then you pick your calendar. And so you could say education ever. And that will filter your list by their attendance. Now you can add a variety of other traits. You could say people who have attended an education event who are living, and who are living is important, obviously, members, and whose age is greater than 18. And that all of a sudden starts filtering down your list to just a few people. So that's why it's so important to have this attendance information in there for a variety of different events, because it allows you to find people by much more narrow-grained criteria. All right, before we jump into the people screen, I want to show one other area that I think fits into time. We talked before, just very briefly, about using your time in the church management software. Underneath settings, there's a thing called logins. Actually, pardon me, we're going to go to roles first and then go to logins. Roles allows you to set permission levels for people to use Church360 to a certain extent. Right now we are in administrators, but if you wanted to have somebody who could just enter attendance for you, you could say attendance entry, and we'll just go with green, and the only thing that they can do, oops, is enter attendance, and we'll click save. And now that role could be assigned to a volunteer who comes in on Monday or Tuesday, takes a look at your attendance cards or your registration book, and marks people as attended. And the way you would do that is you'd go to logins, and you'd find that person. We'll pick on Dave Abbott, and we'll select that role of attendance entry and invite him. Now, an invitation has been sent off to him. You may want to give him a little bit of context about what he'll be doing, but when he logs in, the only thing he'll be able to do is enter attendance. And so when you think about stewardship of time, not necessarily of your people, but of yourselves, you can see how delegating these tasks to other people can save you time and allow you to be a good steward of not only your time, but as most of you are administrators in the church, of your church's payroll, that you could use your time for things that other people can't do. So that's my other tie-in to the stewardship of time. We're going to jump over here to people. Oh, and I meant to say, by allowing volunteers access to Church360, because it is a web-based solution, you can, your members can log in from home and do some of these things too. So as a member of the Board of Elders, I'll often make calls and add notes to Church360 members from my desk at home. I don't have to come into the church office to do that. All right, we're going to jump into people next. This people view is the primary view in Church360 Members. You can see here that there are, it says people households. You can divide your people on this view into 4 different groupings, either by individuals, that's probably the most common way. Households is the next most common way. But you can also do givers and marriages. And I'll explain that in just a few minutes as we look at some of these other tools here. But for right now, we're going to stay with individuals. And we've got that quick filter as well here. So Sean Robinson is always my example. You can quickly get to him by filtering the list. You don't have to even hit a search button. It'll automatically filter based on the characters that you type. In the far right, you have the ability to upload in a few different ways through vCards or our Shepherd Staff, our PC-based software. You can download, and this is really where it's going to get into using the data, and we'll talk about that later on. You can print and save reports. We'll get into reports in a little bit. And then here, once again, is your Smart Group selector. Now, to the right of this, and we'll come back to Smart Groups, to the right of this, you have columns. And just like on the calendar view or the events view, you can select calendars, here you can select columns of data. And there's a variety of different things here, and we can even add to that listing. But if I deselect and I just choose photo, name always shows. You can't take name off. But if I do photos, phone numbers, email address, and address, just put the contact information there. This becomes a very nice, quick and easy directory. And then what I could also do is go back to those attendance traits like we talked about. Anybody who has attended education ever. And you can do multiple groups. So an education event ever, there's my listing. So if I want to contact people about a new Bible study, I can do that. Let's dig into the profiles real quick. We're going to go to Dave Abbott. This is an individual profile. Now, Dave Abbott is a member of the Abbott household, and households have profiles too. The profile doesn't do too much other than to say, here is data, information that applies to everybody in the household. So for example, the address. The address is set at the household level, and really that's how you should view households, is not families, but physical addresses. And in today's world, family structures are so diverse that you may have people living in the same household where you might have grandma or grandpa and aunts and uncles and cousins and maybe not even non-family members, friends or somebody who needs a place to stay. You could put all of those within the same household without assuming that there's that family structure, because members are just members of the household. Now, we'll talk about families in a moment. Things like phone numbers, email addresses, histories, custom fields over here like newsletters, visited, those are things that apply to everybody in the household. So for example, a household phone number would be a landline. Now those are almost antiques, although I do know some people like my family who still has that. My wife's a teacher and we only give out her landline number, not her cell phone number, to all her students. So that's one thing. Family email addresses are becoming more and more a thing of the past, but you can still add them here. Let's go back to the profile view. I mentioned before that households are not the same as families. Families are applied to people. Households don't have families. They may have families living in them, but they're not families. The family can be any kind of direct relationship that an individual has. So here you can see that Dave has a wife and 2 children. You could add other people in the database, like maybe his parents, or if he is the guardian or has a ward, you could put that in there. Grandparents, siblings, and grandchildren as well. Now we only go to those direct relationships and one off. So grandparents and siblings are a secondary relationship. We haven't gotten to a tertiary relationship yet, although we've considered that in the past. We've had many requests for aunts and uncles and the like. But this allows you to have family structures that are completely independent of households, because how many people in your congregation may be related? I know in my church it seems like everybody has some kind of distant connection. We're here in St. Louis, which is just a large, small city where everybody is connected in some way. We have many different family relationships within the church, 3 or 4 generations of families that are there, and so you can connect them in that way without them having to live at the same address. Now you can add individual contact information like phone numbers and email addresses on the profile view, and those will just apply to the person whose view you're on. But I really want to highlight the things, and as we get into, we talk about time, as we talk about the stewardship of talents, this is where you track that information. And so, for example, we have tags. Now, tags could track any number of things. They could track skills, like maybe Dave Abbott can speak Spanish. Maybe he does woodworking. You could tag hobbies, like fishing, or maybe he's just a big football fan. And for your Super Bowl party, Dave's the one of the people you want to invite. Now, there may be some things that you want to track for everybody, and you want to be able to report on that in different ways, or at least see it in different ways. That's where custom fields comes in. Tags is so flexible that you can just add tags on the fly like I just did here. But some things like occupation, you may want to put in the same place every time and in a certain structure. That's what custom fields does for you. If you go to settings and general settings again, we looked at this briefly, and look at it in more detail. You have here custom person fields, the bottom of the settings tab. Things like elder district, we call it district, other people call it territories. There's a variety of different things you could call it. That makes a great option. You could call it district 1, district 2, etc. That would be a list custom field where it's a drop down, and we'll look at that in a second. But things like occupation, if you make that a text field, that would be a single place to always enter the occupation. I'm also going to put in, we're going to call it school / employer. Put that as a text field. We're going to save these. Now let me get back to Dave. Go back to people. Oops. There we go. We saved that. Go to Dave Abbott. Now on the far right here, you can see underneath some of the demographic information like sex, ethnic group, birthday, baptism, confirmation, all of that. You'll have elder district, which is a drop down. There's my District 1, District 2. Occupation, maybe he's an engineer. And school employer, I think 0 engineering is what I often put. I may have misspelled that. It's a fictional company anyways. But that allows you to keep information about your members, their time and talents, or what really right now we're just talking talents. Talents or other things that are unique to them that they can use, they can manage these gifts God has given them to serve the Lord and His church. So that's what a profile view looks like. Once you fill this out, then under people, you begin to use these other tools more. So if I wanted to put in a smart group based on elder district, I could. If I wanted to do something based on occupation, we only have one thing, but whose occupation is engineer. And you can do that. Think about career paths that might have special skill sets. So for example, I'm in marketing. I often get involved with communication efforts of my church. So when we did a new website, I was involved in that because that's part of what I do on a day-to-day basis. And so you could look for anybody whose occupation contains marketing in it. Those are just a few examples of how you can use it. But then you can also use these fields as data columns. So like elder district can go in there, occupation, employer, or school/employer, all of these become columns that you can add. Now, I know one of the questions we have in here is about custom fields. I know putting this in here was part of the question. You're limited to 5 custom fields per individual field and per household field. Tags goes a long way in filling that out. The custom fields are best used when it's structured data where you want the same information for every person or household, or you want information entered in the same way. Now the other field that we didn't show was dates fields, but as you get into an individual view, think about the dates that you would want that are not already listed. So birthday, baptism, confirmation, all of that's put in there. And then down below you have things like last attended, last visited, or offerings and pledges, which is where we're going next. This gives you quick access to information related to their time. So this view of a person is really just this one great big link to stewardship data. All right, we'll get into reports in a little bit more. Let me go into offerings next. Now this is the typical, or stereotypical, I should say, stereotypical stewardship area where you think about your treasures. Now, we know that's only a portion of what stewardship is, but it's an important portion and the thing that people often think of most. And so we've made it very easy to track that information. So this view is your offerings view where you can see all the offerings given, and there's various levels of permission so that you can not see certain things. So if your pastor doesn't want to see the offerings by person but wants to see the offerings totals, you can set his role like that where he can't see who gave what, but he can see the general offerings that have been given or the general totals that have been given and not tie it back to people. To enter offerings, you would go here to New Batch up in the top left. You pick the date, and if there's an event, you can associate it with that event, Thursday night Bible study. We'll go and add this batch, and then you can begin typing in offerings. Now, we have modified this process, going back to the stewardship of time. We've made it so quick, you can do it with just a 10 key. So you would type in 101, hit enter, choose the offering type. If they gave a check, that's 2, enter. Check number, enter. General fund, you would put the different fund numbers in there if you have it. So we'll do 6 for education, enter. $25, enter. Move on to the next one. And you'll see there education is a separate fund. We've got different colors for that. That ties back to the calendar, although it's not directly related to the calendar. But we've been consistent in our naming and our colors, so that's a good use of data. But you can fly through offerings. Once you get the hang of it, you never have to take your hand off the 10 key. And so what we say is, if you use offering envelopes, put those in your one hand, put your other hand on the 10 key, and just go through it. And I trained our volunteers at church, and even those who were the older, retired, not used to being on a computer, they were able to pick up pretty quickly as well. And those who use a computer on a daily basis, they picked it up in seconds. Now, the funds are an important part of stewardship, and we talked about that a lot with Ledger. How do you use the funds to make sure that the money donated is donated and used for the right reasons? And that's up here under Settings and Funds. And you can have as many different funds as you want and track the giving by each one of those. And so that's, again, Settings and Funds, and you can put, we'll add another one in for Bible studies, and we'll give it the number 18 and enter. And so now Bible studies can receive donations specifically meant for that. When you're on offerings, then you can start reporting on those, and you can you see these beacons, these tell you what these areas are. You can say summaries by fund, and you've got there all the funds that have received a donation. And you can filter that down even farther by the different tags and smart groups. So you could say anybody on the Board of Education who has contributed to the education fund, and see what that looks like. And these filters get applied up here. So there's education fund. If you're doing summaries by giver, you could apply based on a person and show me all of Kent Williams' donations to the education fund over this period of time. Now, when you think about stewardship, and you often think about stewardship campaigns, and I know that we've talked about how the people who give much often are the ones who are willing to give a little bit more, who might have the means to give more. You can use these kind of tools to find those people. And so you could say something like, okay, we're going to remove these funds, we're going to go just to members. Show me members who have contributed to any fund more than $1,000. And you could say in the last year. And this shows nobody. All right, let's do 6 years. There we go. These people have contributed more than $1,000 in the last 6 years. Now, the data that's showing here is based on this date range. It's not the 6 years. This is just filtering down your list of people. And so you can look at it in both ways, the historical data, but then also the offerings data that I'm looking at right now. And so it really allows you to dig deeper into this data, and that's the fourth area that we're going to go to, is the data and your use of that. Having this data in place allows you to quickly and easily get to the information you're looking for. And so if you are looking for people who've given, like we just did there, you can do that easily. If you're looking for people who are talented in certain areas and you want to ask for their help in a new ministry, you can do that there. Now, all this data can be used in a variety of different ways. So we're going to switch this and just go to members and collapse that. These are all the members. You can use this data then to download contribution statements or email them. That's under the People View and Download. You can create a member directory, do different photo directories or other things. So like if you want a church council contact list, that's one of my most common examples. Church councils will often change every couple of years, and you want to print out a new list of contact information. You don't need to recreate that in a Word document. You can do that right here. You can also do mailing labels. And so if you want to add mailing labels to your newsletter and you only want to send it to members who have attended in the last year, maybe only members who haven't attended, you can do that here. There's other things that you can use data for, like pastoral visits. Here under History, on a profile view, you can add a pastoral visit and say, I visited and provided communion to Dave, and say, you know, he was at home this weekend because of his bad back and requested communion. You could do that here. And you can say this can be seen by pastor as well, and enter that in. And now you have a pastoral visit. And you can see all of those pastoral visits up under collections. and see more data that you can use. And then you can say, okay, show me all of the communion visits we've had, or in this case, that's only one. And again, it's using this data in a variety of different ways. So looking at it from a reports perspective, we have many different reports in the system here. And we use a process called starred reports, which is kind of like favoriting a report. We have some out-of-the-box reports, but you can create your own new reports based on these different views. So I can't get into all of them today, but if you wanted an attendance report, you'd go to New Attendance Report, and it'll take you to this view, which is a different view than what you've seen, and you can say, okay, show me all worship attendance for members, and we're going to do it in just this short time frame, and then say percent is, we'll sort it by percent, and this is the low percent. So these are the people who have not attended much during that time frame. And now I can go ahead and save this report. You see the little beacon telling me how to do it. If I save this attendance report from spring, I can always go back to that under reports, and that's now been saved. Now, everybody else who has access to that kind of data and members will see that report in their all reports, and they can go and star that report. And the more people, anybody who has starred the report has a lock on that report saying you can't delete it, you can't get rid of it. This is a report that I'm using. Well, as soon as people are done using it, you unstar the report. And now, if no one else has starred that, it will disappear. This is again going back to stewardship of data. What we have found is that the more reports that are in there, the more overwhelming it is for people and the less likely they are to use the reports. And so we've made it so you tell the software what reports you want to see on a regular basis, and it'll keep that there for you under starred reports. And as soon as you're done, it'll remove them, and it won't be cluttered up for everybody. So that's one of the areas that we help practice stewardship of data by making it really easy to keep your data clean. Now there's many other things that we could show. I want to touch on a few other areas of storing data. So for example, there's a church register which tracks the acts of the church, meaning things that happen at your church that are not necessarily related to your members. So baptisms are a common one, weddings, funerals, confirmations in there too. That's usually your members. But these are the things that the church does and provides opportunities for you to place information about this. So like wedding license number, who the officiant was, where it was, who the witnesses, and other notes. Things like that can be stored in your church register and allow you to have all that data in one place. I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to just check real quickly. We talked about offerings. We didn't go into envelopes too much, but you can do that here. Pledges as well. Pledges is often an important part of stewardship campaigns when we talk about money, and it's real easy to add pledges here that will show up on contribution statements that you can report on and show people's progress. You can say pick a giver, pick an amount, and a time period. Maybe it's $50 every month, and we're going to start it out at the beginning of 2017 and end at the end of 2017, and it's for the general fund. We're going to add that in, and then it'll track given to date. So we'll go down to Dave and Sue's given to date. We click on that. It automatically creates this report, this giving report, that shows the total giving during the pledge date range, the pledge for that date range, whether they're behind or ahead, and what percentage of the goal. So it makes it real easy as you're planning on these offerings to track your progress and see if things are going according to plan. All right, I know I covered a lot of information there. There's more that I could cover, but I really want to get into your questions. So I'm going to switch back over to my PowerPoint for a second. If you are one of the few who are new to Church360 members and you'd like to get started with it, you can start a free 30-day trial at 360members.com. And that'll give you full access to everything. The only thing you're limited by is time. If you'd like to reach out to me personally about these things or talk with a member of my team, put the contact information up there now so that you can see that. There we go. And while that's up there, I'm going to take a look at some of the questions that we have, because I know that there's quite a few that I covered, but I want to make sure that I covered everything. All right, so Marlon had some of the questions that I answered. So, like, can one enter worship and communion at the same time on the same screen? I hope you saw how you would do that just by adding them both to the event. How many custom fields can one create, and are they available on both the household and people view? You can create 5 for each view. They are not available on both views because it's different types of data. But let me switch back over to that real quick. The household custom field, one of the ones that is out of the box that you can also choose to delete if you'd like, is the newsletter field. You don't need that for every person, but it is good to have that for every address, and so that's over there. All right, the next question is, when one adds custom fields, do they show up in the drop-down menus, and do they become sortable fields in the households and people view? Yep, like I showed you, they become part of this columns here, and then you can sort by elder district. And I know I answered these, but I do want to make sure that everybody knows what types of questions are being asked and answered. Can one do mass change of a custom field? Example, name of an elder has changed. Yes, and I didn't show that one. There's check boxes on this people view, regardless of whether it's individuals, givers, or marriages. And you can do a bulk update, and all of your custom fields show there. So you could change the elder district. So if you wanted to move everybody to elder district 1, you can do that there. And it does ask you to confirm the number just so that you don't accidentally do a mass change. And there's not an undo button there because it's going directly to the database. Can one do exempt reports, finding possible errors in the data, such as children over the age of 24 still under member-parent households, no phone number for any member of the household, no address for any member households not receiving newsletters? So yeah, absolutely you can do that. You can say anybody who's a living member now who phone number, click on phone number, and it'll default to the positive, who have any phone number at all, but you can change that to do not have any phone number at all. And so you could say any phone number that contains something, like people who don't have a 314 area, that's our St. Louis area. So yeah, there's lots of different ways you can do exempt reporting. And his next question, are there any update plans for the software to be able to export any view to Excel? Any of the views that make sense to export to Excel have that right now. Some of them make more sense to export to Word, and some of them have the PDF, like the contribution statements as a PDF. So we don't have any other plans to change that right now, but if we're missing something, please go ahead and submit that in the feedback for us. Being able to mail merge a set of fields, this you can do. We don't have like a word processor in here. We rely on you to use Word for that, Microsoft Word, or, excuse me, any other word processor. But you can export this data into an Excel or CSV and use mail merge there. Customized reports, I was able to show some of the customizations. There's plenty more available in there. If there's something we're missing or that you can't find, go ahead and reach out to our support team. There's a good chance it's in there. Being able to separate, add a separate middle name field. I'm glad you brought that up because I missed that during the training. So let me go back here to members, Dave Abbott. If you click on the name up in the top, it gives you the different options for title, middle name, maiden name, suffix. This information is good to have, and where like legal name is in there, where that's needed for contribution statements, you can put that in there. But for the most part, we use the regular name. Now, if there's multiple people in there with the same name, we'll add the middle initial, or the suffix can be displayed to show those differences. So there is that. And if none of these are planned updates, what are some planned updates? We've got a lot of things in the works. Right now we are doing a lot of research in terms of mobile development and how we have that there. It's very easy to use on a mobile device. We're trying to make it even better than that. And so that's in the works. We've got a whole list of more minor things that we are reviewing, and you'll see changes come as we implement them. So things like one of the more recent ones that we didn't do a major release of, but we added removed by and removed on columns here into this view. So there's many of those things. All right, let me keep going down here and see which other questions are out there that I haven't answered yet. Marlon, I think I answered all of your questions. Emily asks, can you create a role that can enter attendance for only one event, i.e. Sunday school teachers? We don't have that where you can enter it for only one event. But let me show you something that's not a real easy to see feature, but it's very practical. So when you are in an event, whoops, I'm sorry, it's under attendance. And this, if you don't want to give people access to attendance, then this is something the church office can do. You can download an attendance sheet. So you go to attendance, pick your event, and download an attendance sheet. And that will give you a document that you can print, and it's pre-formatted to have, let me show you what this looks like. Pop that up. Dun, dun, dun. Sorry, it'll be just a second. Word always goes a little bit slow for me when I'm on a presentation. So what this will do is it will show you anybody who has attended in their previous attendance records and space for future. Now, one thing you can do, and I glossed over this before, I should have shown that in more detail. There's a separate field, everyone, or separate icon here that's this calendar with the double arrows. This means that this person is a regular attender of this event. In one way you could think of it as them having signed up for the event. And you can select all the regular attenders and mark them as attended after you. This one does require a refresh. Let me show that right now. There was no regular attenders for that. And so you can say select all regulars and mark them as attended. And when you go to download the attendance sheet, regular attendees will be on there as well. And so you could mark all of your Sunday school students as regular attenders and then print out an attendance sheet. But our permissions don't restrict it to that type of an event. But that's a really good suggestion, something we can consider in the future. So yeah, here is that event attendance sheet. Slowly loading. Again, Word goes a little slow for me. Anytime you download a document from the internet like I just did, it'll put it in a protected mode. And for whatever reason, whenever I'm doing a presentation, that part just takes a while. So yeah, there you can see the attendance records with the checks already in there for historical ones. So you could just print this out new each week if you wanted to, or do one for the entire month or quarter or something like that. All right, the next question is a follow-up about middle name. Does it show up on mailing labels? It only will show up if there are people with the same name. So if you had two Dave Abbotts and one had a middle initial of B and another had C, it would show Dave B. Abbott and Dave C. Abbott as separate. But you can get that information by downloading it to Excel, and if you want to do a mail merge there. So rather than provide all of these different variations of exports to things like mailing labels, we did what makes sense within 360 and allow you to access that data outside of 360 in an easy-to-use format like Excel. All right, well, I believe, and I'm going to do a quick look and make sure that there's nothing else that I'm missing. I hope I was able to answer all of your questions. We are just at time, so I'm going to switch back here to the contact information screen one last time. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to email me or my team of software consultants. We'll all be happy to get back to you. But otherwise, thank you very much for joining today. I hope that you were able to see how Church360 members can be used for those 4 types of stewardship: time, talent, treasures, and data, and help your congregation have better stewardship, but also help identify opportunities for stewardship among your members. So once again, thank you for attending, and have a great rest of the day. Bye.